welcome again to Wickham Cottage. This is the second episode in our Learn to Knit series. Just to review, last time we did garter stitch, which is just knit every row. And I thought I would show you something that I did years ago. This is a really, really long, comfortable scarf. It's been folded up for quite a while, but you know, if you started wearing it, if you tossed it in the laundry, you know, gave it a little bit of a steam, you could get these wrinkles out very easily. But I mentioned about the tails. If you work just in one color, you should have a beginning tail and an ending tail. But what if you want to do lots and lots of colors, but you don't want to weave in all those tails? The easy way to do it is to take variegated yarn. I've taken, let's see, I have a green in here. It looks like the green is constant. No, it's not constant. So I've got stripes. I worked one color, say this green, I knit a row over and I knit a row back. Then I attached another ball, which is this darker blue. And what you do at the ends is you kind of twist the yarn over it so that it forms a nice decorative edge all the way up. See how I've just kind of twisted the stitches at the end, the yarns, not the stitches, the yarns. I've twisted them just very, very slightly just to bring the bottom one over so that I can work with that again. And I knit across in that color and I knit back. Then I take the first yarn, this light green, and I bring that up. And that forms this nice decorative row. Edge, I should say. Nice decorative edge. Now what I did with this was I used the green and I used blue. And I kept the green and I introduced another blue. Okay. Then I kept that blue and introduced, looks like it's a charcoal gray. Then I kept the gray and I introduced the green again until the end. So I didn't have too many ends, but I get all this nice color. And it graduates gently from color to color because you're keeping one constant. Now you could also change the colors, you know, however you wish. But what I'm trying to say is you don't have to knit a row over, knit a row back, cut the yarn. Knit a row over, knit a row back, cut the yarn. In knitting, there are lots and lots of tricks, and that's one of them, carrying the colored yarn up the side edge. But today we're going to have fun, and we're going to learn how to do stockinette stitch, which has knit stitches on the front and our purl stitches on the back. This is our swatch. And what I'd also like to point out is this garter stitch, neither of these have been blocked. They've just been knit, taken off the needles, and tossed around. See how nice and rectangular that is? Garter stitch has a way of doing that. And that's why I mentioned earlier, if you want to knit garter stitch along an edge, that's what keeps it nice and straight and doesn't allow for this rolling effect. Can you see how this has rolled in on itself? That's what I meant by saying that wool blocks well. If I put this out to block, being acrylic, it's still going to roll back a little bit. It's just inherent in acrylic. It just doesn't retain the shape, the rectangular shape. It's going to curl in. So if that happens to you and you say, what am I doing wrong? You are not doing anything wrong. That's what happens with stockinette stitch. It needs something something to kind of hold it. That's why in sweaters we knit ribs. It holds the stitches kind of in place. Now look at this neat sweater that I'm wearing. This is one of my favorites. It's very, very oversized, which means I can bundle up underneath. I can wear a lot of layers. I can wear a scarf. I like knits to be loose. I like them to be very, very comfortable. This is a nice cable. It's got on each side of the cable, it's got reverse stockinette stitch, and that's what makes these cables sort of pop. Reverse stockinette stitch is just this. It's the reverse side of the stockinette that we're going to learn how to do today. So let's get started. Let me show you how to cast on the stitches and start working in stockinette. Let me reposition everything and I'll be right with you. Okay, let's recap a few things. I'm doing this long tail cast on, looping, wrapping, and pulling through. Okay? Just like we learned in lesson number 1. To do the knit stitch, I go from the front of the work through to the back, wrap the yarn around, and pull it through. Okay? I'll do four of these. Just to recap. Now today's lesson, we are learning how to do the purl stitch. And remember what I said, with knit, you've got the yarn in the back. For a purl stitch, we're going to bring it to the front of the work. We are going to go through the stitch from the back to the front, wrap it around, and pull it to the back. Now I'm going to get my yarn out of the way just so that I can show you something. When I do the purl stitch, remember I kept talking endlessly about the knit V's and the purl bumps? There we have them. So yarn's in the front, enter the stitch so that you're going through the bottom of the stitch, pull it a little bit maybe so that you have more room. The stitches should be snug on the needle, but not so tight that you can't get the needle in easily. Wrap the yarn around and off the needle. Try to get it from a few different angles so that it's easier to see. And do you see? Last time I was using my index finger to help with the needle. Now I'm using my thumb, kind of pushing it out of the way. Okay? And that's all there is to the purl stitch. Now to finish this little lesson swatch, I'm going to do 4 knits on the end, just like I did on this side. Bring the yarn to the back to do the knit stitch and knit your stitches. And now I'm reversing the technique using my index finger again to push the needle through. And remember what I said, this last stitch is usually a little bit tighter. So we've got knits and we've got purls. We are going to turn this work over, and I want to keep this garter edge just to show you what it looks like. So because I knit those stitches, I'm going to knit them again. I'm going to knit these 4 stitches. Okay. So you can see that that is forming the garter ridge. You can see that these have the V's. It's very hard to see so far because it's working in the reverse. But I can do several things right now. I can keep purling because that's what this lesson is. And what you're going to find Bring the yarn to the front. What you're going to find is that we're actually going to end up with garter all throughout, because we've got our knit garter on this side. We're going to form a purl garter on this side. I'm not sure that's what I want to show you right now. So I'm going to take these out, and what we're going to do on this reverse side is simply knit all the way across. Now remember when I said that stockinette stitch is knit on one side and purl on the other side? We're forming a stockinette stitch, but we've come at it a little bit differently this time. Instead of knitting the front side of the work and purling the back, what we're actually doing is purling the front of the work and knitting the back. But it's going to be completely reversible. We're doing this garter on the end, and that's reversible. So when you practice these stitches, do a lot of fun things and see how the fabric forms. It's pretty fascinating. So we're knitting our first 4, and this is just for purposes of this lesson. This is not how our block is going to turn out, unless that's what you'd like. I did my 4 garter stitches. They were all knit. Bring the yarn to the front of the work and begin purling. Purling is relaxing. Like I said, purling gets a little bit of a bad rap. I'm not sure exactly why. It's just knitting tends to go faster. You can get a better rhythm going, and if you use a different method to work your knits, sometimes just the placement of the yarn, it helps it to go faster. So people tend to prefer knit. But if you would like to knit beautiful sweaters or afghans or whatever with lots of techniques, like all of these nice cables, you have to learn both. You have to be adept at both. And what you're going to find is your tension needs to be equal in both. What some people do is they knit at a different tension than they purl. And then you start getting gaps on the back. See how nice and even those stitches are? If your stitches are not even like that, you need to adjust your tension. And what you usually adjust your tension in is the purl stitch. That's usually the one that beginners, have trouble with. So just make sure that you're holding the yarn the same way. Don't be afraid of it. I'm working toward the tips of my needles. Remember, don't be too far down here, because you're not going to have as much control over the stitches. So just do a nice knit so we can get to the other side, and I can show you the purl again. Alrighty. Now this is what I've deemed my wrong side, even though it's the first side that we knit. Here are our 4 garter stitches. Bring the yarn to the front. That's all there is to the purl stitch. Now we're getting toward the end. Got our 4 stitches here. Did you see I brought my yarn to the back to do the knits? There you go. So on this side of the work, you can see that it's like these purl bumps are interrupted. They're staggered on the garter which they are because you're working knits and purls, or rather you're working all knits. So when you see the reverse sides of the knit stitch, what you actually see is a purl stitch. If I turn this over, what we see is this nice garter edge, and you see the stockinette. You see all those lovely bees. Okay, so I do hope you'll give this a try. This will be our block number 2, not with this garter stitch edge, although if you'd like to change your pattern and do this, that's perfectly fine. For block number 2, all I did was cast on 33 stitches. So there are 33 stitches on both the garter block and the stockinette block. Hold on just one moment. I want to show you something else. All right, I want to show you something else. Here is our garter. Here is our stockinette. They both measure 7 inches wide by 9 inches long. You'll have to trust me on this stockinette stitch. It needs to be spread out a little bit. It's rolling in. But they both equal 7 by 9. When I knit this garter, I knit 80 rows. That was how many? So I should have 40 ridges. 2, 4. I'll count those later. All right, but with the stockinette stitch, even though I cast on 33 stitches, the exact same as the garter, I only knit 60 rows. This was 80. This is 60 to get the same length. And that's because of the nature of knitting. See how stretchy that is? This is less stretchy. So I spoke very briefly about gauge. And what I meant by gauge was that you need to knit a little bit of a swatch in order to take a measurement. And once you take that measurement, that's what you use to figure out your stitch gauge and your row gauge. And they will be different. Stockinette and garter have the same stitch gauge. I cast on 33 stitches for both, but their row gauges are different. Since we are measuring 9 inches in length, what we use to get that measurement, I am so sorry. I got thwarted in my recording because my camera needed to have space freed up. Remember, I said that I'm new at this. I don't know where to look. I don't know how much space I need. But I was talking about gauge. And simply, gauge is the number of stitches that is required to give you a certain length or width in your work. So I said 33 stitches were cast on for both the stockinette stitch and the garter stitch, but different row gauges are required. So in the garter stitch, I knit 80 rows, and in the stockinette stitch, I only knit 58 rows. Now your work may vary. Your row gauge may be different than mine, and that's why gauge is so important in everything that we knit. If a pattern calls for a certain number of stitches, for instance, in these blocks, I've just said cast on 33 stitches. If you knit a few rows and you find that you're not at 7 inches wide, say you're 9 inches wide or 4 inches wide, you need to make some adjustments. That could be in your tension, It could be in the yarn that you're using. It could be in the needles that you're using. So experiment. Use a different size needle and see if that makes a difference. Knit it a little tighter, knit it a little looser, or cast on a different number of stitches. If you cast on the 33 stitches that I've suggested and your swatch is too wide, figure out how wide it is. Say it's an inch wide, and you measure an inch, and the number of stitches that you count in that inch, you need to decrease those. So maybe you want to cast on 29 stitches for your swatch. Maybe you need to cast on 35. Don't go too drastic at first. If I'm saying you need 33 stitches, don't go wild and cast on 68, because that's not going to work either. But when we're casting on the number of stitches, I'm going to make suggestions, but look at your own work, measure your own work, and see what's right for you. If you're not planning on donating any of these swatches, and you don't need to have them 7x9, just go with whatever you like. You know, like I said before, you can cast on 50 stitches and do a block, and whatever measurement that is, maybe you want to base everything off that. It's going to be more work for you because you're going to have to recompute everything that I tell you. So that's why I'm sticking with the 33 stitches. If we can cast on 33 stitches, work a block, and it measures 7 inches across approximately, that's great. That's great. And that means that our gauges are consistent. The row gauge at this point is really not that important. You're going to go until your measurement is 9 inches. Now you can use a ribbon, a ribbon measuring tape. You can use a ruler. You can use a gauge measuring tool that are available. You can use whatever you want to measure. Usually, if you put your swatch on a flat surface and use a ruler, it will be most accurate. But we're beginning, and this is meant to be fun, and nobody's judging anything, and nobody's getting out their rulers. If you're happy with your block, that's great. So cast on the 33 stitches, work a few rows. We're just learning or getting back into this, so see how it goes, practice, and then take a measurement. And if it's not 7 inches wide, then make a few adjustments if need be. Work until your block is 9 inches in length, and then bind off. You can reacquaint yourself with the bind off technique in the first video that I did, or I'm going to make some snippets, and these snippets are going to be just quick tutorials so that at a later date you don't have to listen to me all over again. You can just go to the snippet and revisit. So I hope you have fun, and thank you for returning. Thank you. Like I said, I'm new at this. I would like to keep making these. I need to have viewers, you know, so if people will watch me, then I will keep doing these, and we can have fun knitting and doing some of these other crafts. So have a very, very good day. Keep an angel close by, and have fun.